Treasury's 30-year bellwether bond now up 7/32 in price, the yield down to 7.60%. And in London, dashed hopes of an interest rate cut and poor corporate earnings pressuring the market there. The Financial Times 100 share index down almost 28 points to 2469. Meanwhile, in Tokyo overnight, stocks also on the downside. The Nikkei average lost 60 points to close at 16,657. And that's the latest in business. We'll be back in 1 hour. I'm Beverly Shook at the New York Stock Exchange.
President Bush says the economic summit will be good for the American worker and the economy. Can he make it happen? Hello, I'm Catherine Crier. Welcome to Crier and Company. Last week's economic news was a bit sobering. Unemployment in June registered at 7.8%. And President Bush admitted the recovery is not as robust as he had hoped. Mr. Bush is now in Munich attending the annual meeting of leaders of the Western industrialized democracies. The president is expected to press Japan and Germany to lower interest rates in an effort to spur investments and jobs. Joining us today are USA Today columnist Barbara Reynolds, Kathy Bushkin, Director of Editorial Administration for U.S. News and World Report, and Cato Byrne, Vice President for Government Relations at the Heritage Foundation. Welcome all. And Kate, let me begin with you. The U.S. economy, those unemployment figures are going up. Things don't look as rosy as President Bush would like. What's going on?
Well, we're seeing the economy still in the doldrums. The White House obviously had hoped by now they'd have some good news to talk about. There's not much time between now and November, I don't think, to get this economy moving in a direction where the American public will again trust George Bush with another 4 years in dealing with economic issues. He came up with an ambitious plan early in the year, but there has not been any obvious fighting for that plan on Capitol Hill, which makes it harder and harder to blame lawmakers in the democratically controlled Congress when the president himself has not put himself on the line fighting for the kind of initiatives he wants to get this economy moving.
Well, Kathy, we hear the president say the economy is rebounding, things are doing better, and then numbers come up to slap him in the face just a bit. Is it time to take a dose of political reality and bring on a different dialogue for the American people?
Well, yeah, he certainly cannot change the subject at this point. He's got to come to grips with this and tell the public that he understands that things are not as rosy as he hoped they might be after the first quarter. The first quarter looked pretty good, and I think everybody was hopeful. Second quarter is bad, and what's really bad news for President Bush is that the numbers that came out last week on unemployment are just the beginning of probably 2 weeks of bad numbers that are likely to follow. The unemployment numbers usually precede a bunch of other numbers that will be equally distressing and troubling going into the Democrats' convention, giving them lots of fodder for discussing what's wrong with the Bush economic program and why there isn't a better one. He's got to do something quickly to show that he understands the problem, that he gets it, that he knows there's a problem. He's been urged to shake up his economic team. He certainly needs to come back and put a program forward, or at least, as Kate said, fight for the one he put out earlier in the year that we've heard nothing about.
Well, Barbara, we see him over in talking to the Japanese and the Germans saying, you take care of us just a bit, lower your interest rates, bring in those U.S. goods. Is this the right tactic to go overseas to seek help?
Well, I'm not. It's easy to take a cheap shot and say that he shouldn't be there, but I'm not going to do that, because for every $1 billion in trade, it opens up 20,000 jobs in the U.S. economy. But I'm not going to say he shouldn't be there. After all, this is a global economy. But just like all the other leaders, they have their domestic problems. He has his domestic problems. He has to come home. He continues to pass up every chance to do something. For example, the jobs bill, the enterprise bill. You have to blame Congress too, but they had a chance to pass a jobs bill with enterprise zones, with real money, and they whittled it down to nothing. I mean, what does America have to do to say it wants to be productive and to have jobs? The president clearly has found a solution to help Poland. They're discussing how to help Russia, but they still don't know where home is.
Well, Barbara, they don't have to look too far. They have to look, all they need to do, the White House advisors, is look at the record in the 80s. The economy is now being strangled by record high federal taxes, a record level of regulation at the federal level, and record government spending. If the president were to decide to follow Ronald Reagan's lead and do what Ronald Reagan did during the 80s with such enormous success, cut government spending drastically, cut regulation, and not just for a 120-day moratorium, and cut taxes, it would give the oxygen that this economy needs to get going and create jobs.
That is absolutely incorrect, because what Reagan did was transfer monies to the rich, to make large transfers from the middle class to the rich, and the poor and the middle class had to go into debt and borrow to the hilt. And that's one of the reasons why the American consumer cannot buy today, because they're in debt. There's no confidence. You can bring the inflation rate down, you can bring the rates down that the banks charge, but nobody's going to buy big ticket items. We're not going to buy houses. We're not going to buy washing machines, because the consumer is afraid that they're going to be out of work.
I think the point is he's got to do something faster than most of the projects that have been talked about. One obvious one is public works jobs. He could try to do something to create jobs quickly. There frankly is an infrastructure problem in this country with roads and bridges. He could try to address that immediately.
Well, one of the things, Kathy, that he did was last week said the media was only covering the bad news about the economy, and the media was somewhat to blame for the perception that things are still in a downward spiral.
This man likes to blame everybody else for his problems. I don't think the media can be blamed here. I think the media gave the beginning of the recovery in the first quarter a lot of play. Everybody was excited about it. Certainly the media was. We've been suffering as well. I think it's wrong for him to blame the media. What he's really facing is that employment is 40% lower than when he took office. He promised the creation of 30 million jobs, and he's 29 million short of that. The media is doing what it's supposed to do, which is to report the facts and put it into perspective. And I think we're in a political season, so it's got the added heat that he's obviously objecting to.
Well, Kate, let's stay on politics for just a minute. And the president was hoping that a rebounding economy would be helping him as he moved into the fall before the November 3rd elections. What does he do now? Does he stay with the economy as his big issue?
Well, I think he has to. If it's on the mind of the voters, it's the #1 issue. The president can't ignore it, I don't think, and hope to switch the voters' attention someplace else. The economy clearly is going to be a #1 issue in the fall. The president has got to lay out an agenda, and this time fight for it. If he's blaming Congress, he has to show the American people specifically how it is Congress's fault. What has George Bush done to push through his capital gains tax, his investment tax credit, and the sort of programs that might get this economy moving again? He's got to give people a reason to trust him for the next 4 years.
Yeah, but the Bush administration is already trying to switch gears. I heard Darman say over the weekend that the economy is not the real issue. The issue in America is character and values, and this is going to be more dribble from Quayle. And they're probably going to try to shift the attention that 1 out of 10 people are taking food stamps to Murphy Brown, maybe Mother Teresa, but you'll find more fun and games and sitcoms being blamed, Ice-T, rather than to look at our problems. But this time I think it's not going to work.
Well, Kathy, there was an article in the New York Times Sunday magazine about Dan Quayle this weekend, and in fact was talking about him out there on point doing things that President Bush couldn't do, certainly a political strategy. Is that what's going on, that the president may be laying back just a bit or going to Munich, taking care of business, but the issues that will make the campaign are coming from Dan Quayle?
Well, Dan Quayle has certainly taken the lead, particularly in holding the president's conservative base, and I think that's frankly been an asset to the president, where Dan Quayle may have been a liability in many other ways. Dan Quayle's actually serving him well. I think part of the problem for the Bush administration is that the world has changed so fast out from under them that they're kind of lost and they aren't real sure which way to turn. I think most Americans are aware that the economy is changing dramatically and that a recovery won't necessarily take us back to the economy we knew in the 80s. That's, I think, what's most frightening to people, and they haven't really heard from any of the candidates a really good explanation of how we make it through the 90s. That's what I think most people are looking for, rather than the politics of any individual bill or the shifting of the issues away from the economy to issues of value and character, as important as those are.
Yeah, but I think we're being diverted. When we talk about Dan Quayle, we have to look at what Dan Quayle is doing behind the scenes when the lights are out, through the competitive council, while the president makes headlines and photo ops talking about I'm the environmental president and I have signed the Clean Air Act. You have to look and see what Quayle is doing through the back door of that council by deregulating some of those rules and allowing industry to belch toxic fumes into the environment.
Barbara, we already are seeing a record level of regulation in this administration. There are now 125,000 federal employees whose full-time job is to strangle the economy with regulation. The only place where anybody looks at regulation coming out of the executive branch to weigh cost and benefits is at the Competitiveness Council. Dan Quayle is doing a terrific job with respect to the conservative base. The problem is he's not the president's chief economic advisor. He's listening to President Bush, is listening to Dick Daum and Nick Brady, and that is a major problem with conservatives.
But all of us want clean air. I mean, we all want to have the laws that we thought we were passing instead of a backdoor kitchen cabinet deregulating the laws that the American public thought they had passed.
All right, let me interrupt. We're going to have to take a break, and we're going to save this topic for a later day. But later on, Crier and Company creating a bit of balance. Bill Clinton's search for a vice president. But first, the French abortion pill, old issue, new battle over government control.
Very clear that under the Bush administration, when women's health needs clash with their right-wing ideology, women's health loses.
With each new day, you find a way to be your best.
Gillette Sensor for the closest, safest shave ever.
You know you gotta be a little better than the rest.
Only Gillette Sensor has spring-mounted twin blades that sense and adjust to every detail of every face. Gillette Sensor, when you're the best, there's no feeling like it.
Gillette, the best of men. Talk about life.
I called Miracle Air because Roger was missing out on life. Cookie guy.
Talk about living.
I called Miracle Ear because I wanted to hear better.
Talk about dreams.
Listening and understanding is a whole lot easier now. I'm glad I called Miracle Ear.
Talk about a miracle.
If I misunderstand, I missed the sale. But I won't wear one of those big old-fashioned hearing aids. My Miracle Ear Micro Elite works great, and it's tiny as a fingertip.
There you are, reaching for a star, living every moment, sure of who you are.
Call now for a free booklet that shows how Miracle Ear may be able to help you.
Living every moment, sure of who you are.
The call is free. The booklet is free. Even the hearing test is free.
Sometimes little things can make the difference.
Talk about living.
Talk about a miracle.
Talk about a miracle.
Ladies, if you're depending on your husband to take care of you during your older years, you might want to reconsider some tips on planning for your own retirement. Today on Sonia Live, 1 p.m. Eastern, only on CNN.
Others will do all in our power to ensure that this outrageous ban is lifted and to make RU 486 a realistic option for American women.
I find it incredible that these people want to use women as guinea pigs and possibly harm them for the rest of their life.
Last week, customs agents in New York confiscated a supply of the illegal French abortion pill, RU 486, from a woman claiming to be 6 weeks pregnant. The incident prompted outrage from abortion rights activists on both sides. Those opposed to abortion called it a cheap publicity stunt. Those favoring choice called it another demonstration of the government's insensitivity to women. Kathy, apparently this was a stunt of sorts to possibly bring about a court challenge about RU 486 in the United States. Good tactic?
Well, I frankly don't like the tactic. I think coming off the Supreme Court ruling last week, which was focused on the issue of choice, I question whether this is a good idea to shift the focus to method and away from choice. I think the country is not going to be as comfortable debating that issue, and so I question whether this was a really smart move on the part of the pro-choice activists. I think there's a larger issue, though, and that is that we haven't really funded birth control research in this country for more than 20 years, and they're clearly onto something there and are pushing it with the RU 486 decision.
Well, Kate, isn't that some of the reason for having a court challenge, that the FDA has been slow to work on this, that they are concerned about safety while European women are using this particular drug and trying to spur on the research community in this country?
No, it seems to me that the group at JFK last week trying to challenge the import order against RU 486 are on very weak ground. It's only been in use for 3 years in Europe. There's virtually no data on its long-term effects, and the AMA backs the import order as laid out by the FDA. I think factually they have a very weak case. It's clearly way too early to approve this drug with potentially harmful side effects for use in the States.
Well, Barbara, are you confident that that's the reason the FDA is acting as it has and hasn't moved more quickly, or is there a little politics involved?
Well, I think it's politics involved. First of all, I think that the tactics that were employed by now were good when you consider the extreme conditions of the court, restrictive provisions against abortion. Here we have a pill that could be taken in the privacy of one's home. If you don't think things are extreme, there's been 110 abortion clinics bombed. Now, you have to do something to bring this issue to the forefront. It looks like that there's still this inclination to punish women. I think it's not painful enough. That's part of this reason why they're trying to keep this off the market. But what's wrong with a pill, something that you don't have to have the streets filled with people protesting, something a woman can make without going back to the coat hanger days that we have as these restrictions kick in.
What's wrong with it, Barbara, is that it hasn't been proven to be safe over the long term for use by women. We are testing it. The import order does not cover importation of the drug for testing purposes. It is being tested, but it's far too early to allow it otherwise. I suspect what the pro-choice forces might have wanted to do by staging this confrontation at the airport is shift the focus from the decision handed down last week by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court backed restrictions on abortion supported by a broad plurality of the American public. From 70% to 80% of the American public supports exactly the sort of restrictions enacted in Pennsylvania and upheld by the court. When we talk in terms of those restrictions, the pro-choices in favor of abortion on demand for 9 months lose the American public, frankly, who have always opposed abortion on those terms.
I think what it does and what it has the anti-abortion people so outraged is that it just it takes their issue away. There's been testing on this. You ought to listen to what the French women are saying. They're taking it. They're saying it's safe. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be more testing, but I know of 3 deaths from it in London. But, I think it's much safer than the birth control pills that we have already.
Kathy, it's a political year. How fast do you expect the FDA to move?
I don't think they're going to move fast at all. I think they've got absolutely no incentive to move fast, and furthermore, the French company has said it doesn't want to come in and push the tests as long as it fears that it will have protests on its hands. So it's effectively being boxed in as well. I don't think there will be any movement on this year, and I think it's unfortunate. I think the focus will be on the Freedom of Choice Act that the Congress is likely to pass and the President is likely to veto. I think that's where the focus is still going to be for this election year.
All right, well, coming up, the vice presidential sweepstakes. Who made Bill Clinton's short list? We'll be right back.
FBI statistics report that 1 in 40 cars will be stolen this year. Will your car be next? I'm not an actor. I'm Captain Jack Cleric. This space used to have a car parked in it. The owner will be back shortly to find that his car was stolen. He could have prevented this theft had he installed the club on the steering wheel of his car. The club is a bright red, tough tempered steel bar that cannot be cut and attaches to any car's steering wheel. Once attached, it makes steering impossible. Plus, because of its high visibility, an auto thief will walk away from your car and look for an easier, unprotected target. After testing, we recommend the club for Operation Lockup. So why not do what millions of other Americans and police officers are doing? Protect your car with the club. But please beware of cheap imitations. Make sure that the anti-theft device you buy says the club on the handle.
The Club, now available at most stores where auto supplies are sold.
I'll never go back to denture pastes or powders again.
Here's why. C-Bond denture adhesive. No other adhesive works like C-Bond, and it holds dentures so tight, so long. C-Bond combines two powerful adhesives into a soft micro-thin seal that bonds your dentures to your gums, can hold them comfortably all day long.
I'll never go back to pastes or powders.
There's no messy cleanup. C-Bond is so easy to remove. Nothing holds dentures like C-Bond.
You'll never go back to pastes or powders again.
Some people buy a prestigious German motor car just to spend and make a big impression at the curb. Not so Volkswagen Passatos. For them, European driving's the thing and Farford Newcomb's the word. And as for making an impression, well, nothing impresses a valley more than a man who knows the value of a buck.
Suddenly, vitamins are all over the news.
Fact is, 2 out of 3 adults don't get all that's recommended in their diets.
2 out of 3?
Wonder if I'm getting the vitamins I should.
There is a cereal, though, that has 100% of 10 essential vitamins. Whole grain total.
Of course.
Just one bowl gives you a full day's allowance of these vitamins. Total. One bowl, 100%.
With all the vitamin news, I'm eating Total.
Of course.
Making life a little sweeter.
What could be cooler than ice cream with all the taste of a Milky Way bar?
Making life a little sweeter. Milky Way.
Taste it, Grandpa.
He never would have tried this with his old adhesive.
Fix-It-Dent holds stronger than any other adhesive. It even stands up to the hottest liquids. For the strongest hold you can get, Fix-It-Dent and forget it.
From London, one of Europe's financial capitals, and from Washington, D.C., the center of power in America, CNN brings you the first global newscast with Hillary Bowker and Frank Sesno, the International Hour, today, 3 p.m. Eastern on CNN.
Democratic presidential candidate Bill Clinton is expected to announce his choice for vice president later this week. Even though Clinton has been tight-lipped about the candidates, speculation is centered on Senators Al Gore of Tennessee, Bob Kerrey of Nebraska, and Harris Wofford of Pennsylvania. Also in the running is Indiana Congressman Lee Hamilton, who yesterday on NBC's Meet the Press said he opposes a parental leave bill and disagrees with Clinton on some abortion restrictions. Barbara, were you surprised that the list sounds relatively traditional?
Yes, and that's why I'm not that interested in it. I hope that whoever they choose, of course, can spell potato. But beyond that, it's the same old white male group. I don't even think that a woman was seriously interviewed. I know that they talked to Ann Richards, but I don't know how serious they were. I don't know of a black that they're talking to. And so it's back to the old way. And they're still blaming Ferrara for losing with Mondale. But yet a man loses all the time when a Democrat, male anyway, and they don't blame him. So it's just a boring ticket so far.
Well, Kate, let's look at the ticket and get some pluses or minuses. You've got Nebraska, you've got Tennessee. It sounds very much in Clinton's territory. Are these individuals that could help the ticket?
Well, I guess somebody's telling Bill Clinton they can. They're certainly not a group that anybody get too excited about, but by the same token, to the extent Bill Clinton has not got an awful lot of national experience, I don't suppose we should be surprised to see his advisors and himself look to Capitol Hill. Senator Gore, it's sort of beyond me. I mean, he's one of the more liberal senators from Tennessee, the same age bracket as Bill Clinton is. I don't see him bringing an awful lot to the ticket. Senator Wofford out of Pennsylvania has taken on this sort of aura of being a dragon slayer ever since he beat Dick Thornburgh for the Senate. But if you look carefully at that race, I don't think that's an accurate assessment. Lee Hamilton, in many respects, might be the more interesting choice. He's been in Congress almost 30 years, so he certainly has experience on Capitol Hill. Given his leadership in the area and his experience in the area of foreign affairs, he might complement Bill Clinton, who has strictly domestic experience.
Well, Kathy, that could be very interesting. You would have Indiana and Indiana with Dan Quayle in the debate there. But what about Lee Hamilton, who came out and said he supported the abortion decision by the Supreme Court last week, opposes parental leave? Might these be factors Bill Clinton would have to look at and reject?
Well, I don't know. First of all, I'm a Hoosier, so I think it'd be a wonderful opportunity to see two Hoosiers going at it, and quite an interesting contrast, actually. Well, I think, you know, this party needs to reach out and be broad. I think that may be a broader bridge, however, that Clinton is comfortable crossing. Those were two fairly significant issues for Hamilton to put out there. However, he would bring a lot of strength to the ticket. I think the way one way to look at these choices without any of us knowing who it's going to be is he has a choice between age and experience in Hamilton and Wofford, and youth and sort of the new generation of leaders in Gore and Kerry. And I think that'll be an interesting thing to see which direction he goes, because I think that will tell us a lot about the kind of campaign he's going to try to run this fall. More that than on the issues themselves.
And from each of you, real quickly, Barbara, starting with you, Ross Perot, what direction should he go in?
Well, I think if he goes with Jean Kirkpatrick, which I've heard bandied about, he'll lose because she reminds people of Maggie Thatcher. So I hope that he's a much broader than that.
So much for wanting a woman on the ticket,
right,
Barbara.
Right. Well, what about that, Kate?
Well, I mean, it seems to me that Barbara ought to welcome a woman running on the national ticket. I think Ross Perot's more interesting choices is to go with an insider and outsider, more so than a Republican or a Democrat. And that'll be very interesting. Many who viewed him as an outsider have become increasingly uneasy with him having gathered around himself some of the most experienced old Washington political hands. So what his vice presidential choice tells us about what kind of a presidency, inside or outside, he plans to have.
Well, Kathy, he actually went and talked to Paul Tsongas about how to find a vice presidential candidate. He's certainly making some interesting inquiries.
He's talked to everybody. He talked to Bill Clinton last week. You know, this is a man who is reaching out, and I think that's to be applauded. This will clearly be the most important decision he makes. For people who are uncomfortable with him on certain grounds, this can either reassure people and bring him into the camp further, or it's going to push people further away. And I think this is such an unpredictable candidacy. He's really got to think this one through very carefully.
Well, a great discussion to start off the week. Thank you all very much. Barbara Reynolds, Cato Burns, Kathy Bushkin. Thanks a lot. Now, if you'd like to write to us, send your letters to Crier & Company, P.O. Box 740166, Atlanta, Georgia, 30374-0166, or send us a fax to 404-681-3578. I'm Catherine Crier, and tomorrow on Crier & Company, an irreverent look at the political world through the eyes of some very funny people, including talk show host and former Saturday Night Live news anchor, Dennis Miller. Thanks for watching today. Now let's get a look at what's coming up on NewsHour with Bobbie Battista. Bobbie?
Thanks, Catherine. Coming up in just a few minutes, while demonstrators wrangle with police outside the economic summit in Munich, leaders of the industrialized nations wrangle over aid to Russia. Crew members of the Space Shuttle Columbia reach a milestone in space, and voters in Iowa send President Bush a message about the number 2 spot on the Republican ticket. Those are just some of the stories next on NewsHour.
Coming up, NewsHour, followed by Sonia Live after a word from your local cable system here on CNN.
It's Ray Stevens' comedy video classic.
Here comes boogie dad, there goes boogie dad, and he ain't wearing no clothes. Hold it!
Ray Stevens has sold millions of comedy records.
Yeah, I dig.
You've listened and laughed at him for over 2 decades.
Come and lay here by my side. Till the early morning light.
Now, for the first time, you can see him on home video in 8 of his greatest, funniest hits.
Are you naked?
And you get it all on one hilarious VHS videotape.
You should have seen the look in her eyes when that squirrel jumped her garters and crossed her thighs, and she jumped to her feet and said, "Lord, have mercy on me."
You'll get the Mississippi Squirrel, the Street,
Oh, yes, they call him the street.
Sitting Up with the Dead,
But Uncle Fred just sat right up.
Surfing USSR. Santa Claus is watching you.
He's everywhere. He's everywhere.
Help me make it through the night.
It's easy for you to take.
And
It's me again, Margaret.
They
got me, Marguerite.
This collection also includes one of Ray Stevens' most loved songs.
Everything is beautiful. It's all
We'll have a big old time, Marguerite.
So pick up that telephone and start dialing now. Here's how to order. For rush delivery of your Ray Stevens classic comedy video, use your credit card and call 1-800-257-1257. That's 1-800-257-1257. Or send $19.95 plus $4.50 shipping to Ray Stevens, P.O. Box 8250, Atlanta, Georgia 30306. That's 1-800-257-1257.
This is CNN.
Protesters clash with police outside the site of the economic summit.
A milestone in space, a 2-year shuttle endurance record eclipsed now by the crew of Columbia. Welcome to NewsHour. I'm Reid Collins in Washington.
And I'm Bobbie Battista at CNN Center in Atlanta. The crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia today ventured into territory where no shuttle crew has ever gone before. Less than 3 hours ago, Columbia's odometer clocked a record for the longest space shuttle flight ever. CNN's John Holloman joins us now for the latest on this marathon mission. John?
Bobbie, that's exactly what it's been. You know, the shuttle astronauts have now been in orbit nearly 3 hours longer than any previous crew. They're planning to stay up there for 13 days, returning to Earth on Wednesday morning. Earlier today, they talked about life aboard their cramped spaceship. Astronaut Carl Meade was asked what he's most looking forward to when he gets home.
The shower, for sure. The physical aspect of this is not very demanding at all. Actually, it's the mental that I think challenges most of the people. This is rather like an extended camp-out trip, if you know what I mean, so it's not really that bad.
176 trips around the world so far for Columbia's crew. This is what they can see as they look out the window. The west coast of the United States as it goes by, and as the shuttle turns south toward the Gulf of Mexico, you might even be able to see Hurricane Darby with its eye clearly defined. Crystallographer Larry DeLucas is about to show us some crystal growth. There's the hurricane. He's been doing crystal growth experiments for the entire mission. He promised that the crystals he brought home from this mission will be the largest ever grown. And from what he says, he'll be able to keep his promise. DeLucas has just come out of a 4-hour stint in the bag that pulls fluid from his head to his legs. Pilot Ken Bowersox is shutting down some of the experiments that have been operating now for more than a week. The astronauts promise a news conference tomorrow morning, and they're planning to touch down in the California desert on Wednesday morning, just after 9 o'clock Eastern Time. We will, of course, be here with live coverage of that. Reid?
John, in Munich, Germany, leaders of the world's 7 biggest industrial democracies have started their 3 days of summit talks. There was a lot of pushing and shoving by demonstrators outside the Palace of Wittelsbach, where police made some 200 arrests. But inside, the business includes the watch on besieged Sarajevo and the efforts to ensure relief supplies get into there quickly and safely. Also up for discussion, the big Western aid package to Russia. CNN White House correspondent Mary Tillotson is in Germany.
Just about anybody with anything to protest is doing it in Munich this week, since the leaders of the 7 big industrial democracies are all here too. One contentious issue facing the economic summit: can the so-called G7 nations strike a deal to revamp the world trading system? The European community has agreed to cut its subsidies to farmers, but not as deeply as the U.S. wants. American Treasury Secretary Nicholas Brady says the EC move is a good step, but does not change the problem of trade barriers to U.S. farmers. The trade deal has to be turned into an omelet, says Brady. He calls the current EC agriculture concessions just an egg. German Chancellor Helmut Kohl had breakfast with President Bush this morning and claimed the economic summit will mean jobs for Americans, a point Mr. Bush is expected to stress at home, where he is in a difficult race for re-election. As if to buttress Kohl's point, the Bavarian Motor Works and South Carolina Governor Carol Campbell are in Munich, trumpeting BMW's decision to open a plant in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
This investment will create, according to all of the calculations, in its first phase, with the support investment that will come in the ripple effect, about 10,000 jobs total.
Just a year ago in London, it was Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev who met with the G7. On Wednesday, Boris Yeltsin, president of the Russian Republic, will meet with the industrial leaders.
So the commitment to fundamental economic and political reform is well underway. Yeltsin carries that torch. He has said that it is irretrievable, it is irreversible. He plans to see it through. And therefore, obviously, it's up to us to help him.
Yeltsin arrives in Munich with a new promise from the International Monetary Fund for $1 billion in aid. He will be looking for still more assistance from the G7, including money to help repair or close dangerous nuclear reactors behind what used to be called the Iron Curtain. The curtain was never really iron, of course. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster 6 years ago proved that, when radioactive fallout from the Soviet accident drifted over Western Europe. The G7 nations are divided by geography on how much to invest trying to prevent another Chernobyl-type disaster. It is most urgent to Europeans who live closest to those Chernobyl-type reactors. But differences with the U.S. and Japan, at least about coordinating reactor safety, are expected to be resolved at this summit. Mary Tillotson, CNN, Munich.
Well, voters in Iowa have a message for President Bush. Dump Dan Quayle. More than half the voters questioned in a poll released today by the Des Moines Register say Mr. Bush should pick another running mate. Overall, 58% of those polled disapprove of the vice president's performance. Only 36 approve. There's been no response yet from Ross Perot to a report that he had a coral reef blown up so he could dock his yacht closer to his Bermuda vacation home. Time magazine says Bermuda officials ruled against Perot's request to dredge the area in front of his house in 1986 because it's protected by environmental laws. But according to the magazine, Perot's construction crew went ahead with the demolition anyway. The magazine says Perot told Bermuda officials he didn't know about the demolition work. But a construction expert told the magazine Perot put on snorkeling gear to watch the demolition. Well, Democratic presidential candidate Bill Clinton and New York Governor Mario Cuomo will put their differences behind them at the Democratic convention. The Clinton campaign said today that Cuomo will formally nominate the Arkansas governor for president. Cuomo will deliver the nominating speech on the third day of the four-day convention. The two Democrats have had a history of stormy relations.
New York Times today is quoting U.S. government officials as saying that Saddam Hussein has launched a major purge of the Iraqi military. This on the heels of earlier suggestions Saddam had survived a coup attempt just last week. Pentagon officials today are telling CNN that the U.S. Army has compiled an 80-page long document outlining war crimes allegations against the Iraqi leader. The New York Times had reported today this file has been tied up in the Pentagon's bureaucracy now for the past 5 months. And inside Iraq, United Nations inspectors continue a vigil outside the Agriculture and Irrigation Ministry in Baghdad. The United Nations team set up to monitor the destruction of Iraq's chemical warfare capability has been demanding access to the building. Iraq says no, claiming the ministry is solely civilian in purpose. The wife of the French president, François Mitterrand, has told her husband she is okay after narrowly escaping a car bomb explosion today in northern Iraq. The bomb blew up a car in Daniel Mitterrand's convoy. It killed 4 people, injured some 19 others. Mrs. Mitterrand is on a humanitarian mission in the Kurdish region of northern Iraq.
Well, officials say conditions are ripe for catastrophic brush fires in the west. That story is just ahead on NewsHour. We'll also tell you about trouble at the Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. 1 inmate is dead. And at 18 minutes past the hour, facing a sagging economy, college graduates are rediscovering an alternative to a paying job. And at 34 minutes past the hour, disposable cameras, an idea that some camera makers hope will go away.
Freedent's the one.
Only one gum leads the way when you've got dental work, and that's Freedent. Freedent won't stick to your dental work, so you can be confident chewing it. And because it also moistens your mouth and freshens your breath, Freedent's in a class by itself.
Freedent's the one.